Hi, I can pretty much guarantee that you'll have a lot of fun reminiscing playing all huge hits found in this video, as most of them were true gems in the respective genres, and really fun to play. So let's jump straight in. Cyberstorm 2 Corporate Wars is a futuristic sci-fi mech strategy, and sadly not as good as its predecessor was. It's not a bad game, mind you, not the case here at all, it's just not improved enough to be a full-fledged 2.5 seems more appropriate. One area it unquestionably shines in though is the customization, as it allows for a lot when it comes to making all the mechs, tanks and hovercraft your own. The three fundamental vehicles differing in speed and size. There's numerous chassis for each unit type, each with their own number and kind of weapon hardpoints to which this could be attached. And since there's 7 different weapons, there is a lot you could do with the units to make them your own. The pilots, so bioderms, can be customized too by setting appropriate stats for them, which are entirely dependent on your tech level and cost more the more you stat them. So, it's the right combination of units and bioderms that will win you the campaign. Cyberstorm 2 was made as a turn-based game and it's best balanced when played like it. But if you're more of an RTS enthusiast rather than the turn-based nut, it can be switched into optional real-time mode. Although I would strongly oppose it, and not because I don't like it, which I don't, but as an addition only and not the main game's feature, it's a bit unbalanced. So if possible, resort to only using real-time for sure-thing battles to speed up the gameplay. Cyberstorm 2 takes place a long time after the events of the first one, and Cybrids, villains of the previous entry, are no longer a major threat. But when there's nothing to fight against, we usually revert to our default state and turn against each other to battle for resources, wealth or power. In this particular case, it's all three rolled into one. All because a mysterious jump gate appeared in the Typheus system and all 8 major corporations want the control of it and what's behind to themselves only. And whenever you don't want to share something, you have to use force to keep it your own. And that is precisely what happened. Being human is quite difficult for me, you know? It's my first time being anything sentient too, so I have no prior experience to compare it to or draw comparisons from, but watching people fight battles for stupid, often symbolic reasons is just painful. Because I would want so much more for humanity, and yet I know deep in my heart that it's us who's gonna be the ones to doom ourselves. I mean, games I do get, it's for fun and it's mostly harmless, but we're not foreign to aggression and violence in the name of someone else's ideology in real life either. And that's kinda scary. Upon its release, first Moto Racer was the best motorcycle racing game on PC and one of the best racers overall. It didn't try to be a simulation, it placed all its bets on arcade fun and won big, both in eyes of gamers and critical acclaim. And if I was to boil it down to the most essential, then Moto Racer 2 was the same but better. Graphics engine saw few refreshes and iterative changes, there were considerably less pop-up, more detailed roadside objects and higher frame rates to name a few. The weather conditions are varied and user configurable too, which is always fun. An addition of all new night racing mode, with all that it entails, lights flaring and such, was pretty fun. Generally speaking, Moto Racer 2 looked and played better than anything you could get at the time on any of the consoles. It features 32 race tracks for both superbike, street racing and off-road motocross, and 16 different vehicles, 8 for each kind of a race. Other than that, everything else that made the first game great was included in the second two, an uncanny and unbeatable sensation of speed was on a definite forefront of the experience. I've been talking about it for a while now, deliberately avoiding a particular subject, leaving best for the last, so to speak, namely level editor. Yep, you could make your own tracks in Moto Racer 2. But if you think about it, changed it from being a game with 32 of them to one with potentially unlimited number of tracks. So, near infinitely replayable one. The short of it all is that if you enjoyed arcade racers, there was hardly any better to play in 1998. Now, I'm painfully aware that whatever I will say about Grim Fandango, good or bad, I will upset someone, as it's such an iconic title that everyone and their mother has an opinion about it. And it's only natural that everyone considers theirs the only right one. Grim Fandango is obviously Tim Schafer's baby and LucasArts' first full 3D adventure. And if you don't know who Tim Schafer is, then perhaps you won't get upset with me talking about it after all. One can only hope. But, so that we're on the same level, he was the mastermind, or at least one of them, with Ron Gilbert being the other, behind some of the most well-known, beloved and historically most significant games from LucasArts. You know, the Maniac Mansions and Monkey Islands to name a few. I mean, do you really need to name any more? These were kinda like the benchmarks, and by some, yours truly included, considered benchmarks in point-and-clicking to this very day. Anyway, Grim Fandango takes place in the land of the dead, where deceased humans go to lead their second, dead life so to speak, before eventually dying again and turning into flowers. I know, crazy. But that life after life looks eerily similar to the original one that we all lead here. So they have careers, sleep, go on trips, fall in love and do everything that we do, just in their second, undead iteration. A graphically stylized, based on Mexican mythology and film noir captivating in its design iteration, I must add. I mean, I wouldn't say that the Grim Fandango characters are beautiful in any definition of the word, and yet you won't be able to take your eyes off them. The protagonist that we get to follow is Manuel Manny Calvera, a travel agent at the Department of Death in the city of El Maro, where he's employed to work off his debt to the mysterious powers that be. The game is divided into 4 chapters, each of them taking place on November the 2nd, so over a span of 1 full day in the 4 consecutive years, and sees Manny go on an epic quest full of odd happenings and intrigues to uncover a corruption within his organization. Most puzzles in Grim Fandango are inventory-based, with some occasional environmental ones here and there to keep it fresh all throughout. Traditional for LucasArts' games mouse controls have been abandoned for Grim Fandango, with Manny moving by use of arrow keys and indicating points of interest to interact with by tilting his head towards them when passing by. I always found mouse controls to be the easiest to grasp and operate games with, so the change was something I needed to get used to. Eventually I did, and you will too, and the controls will begin to feel like a second nature. Also, modern Telltale games use the exact same scheme, so if you played those you'll feel right at home in Grim Fandango. And since we're on the subject of amazing adventures, with Grim Fandango being one of them, how could I not mention Sanitarium, another of the greats of 1998. This one, however, is much more serious, dark, devoid of any humor whatsoever, and touches difficult subjects of mental health and sanity, or lack thereof really. Sanitarium is a psychological thriller point-and-click adventure, and not a light-hearted one at all, but oh so captivating that you won't be able to put it down, I promise. In Sanitarium you play as Max. Or that's what everyone seems to be calling you, at least cause you don't know your name. In fact, you don't know anything about yourself or your past. You don't even know where you are and why you're there in the first place. You may as well be Bob the Builder, who lost it after being let go from his beloved decades-long career of bobbing and building. You've really no recollection of anything at that point? Well, so that you're not at loss, let me put your mind at ease. You're in an old, rundown and clearly underfunded sanitarium of sorts, and you got there after waking from a coma caused by a terrible car accident. So there's that. Not much to go on, but a definite start. As you go through the game, you'll need to try to piece together what your life once was and figure out answers to all the questions you might have. And there's so many of these. Anyway, your investigation will see you transported mysteriously to various often otherworldly locations, like a small town inhabited only by malformed children and overseen by an alien entity known as the Mother, or a circus terrorized by the squid-like creature and surrounded by seemingly endless deep ocean, or even an alien village overrun by cybernetic insects. And that's just a few of these. The line between real and imaginary will be thin in this one, and not always clearly visible. So, where all these locations will feel anything but bright, they also appear to be very real in the same time. In fact, the whole going in and out of reality thing will be an overarching theme throughout the most of the game, as you will struggle to regain your memory and eventually unravel the truth surrounding the mysterious Dr. Morgan, the head of the asylum. The plot will take you on a trip and a half and will be filled with more than one twist before its conclusion. Sanitarium's presentation is spectacular. High-resolution, high-color graphics and over-the-head viewpoint portray the nightmare-fueled locations perfectly. All the extra background and foreground details used liberally in each of the areas that you'll visit will add on to the feeling of uneasiness, being lost, nay, drowning in the sea of craziness, fighting for each little and shallow breath of normality in the otherwise hallucinations-induced dream world. As most of you know, I don't really play RTSs, but I can appreciate one if it's spectacular, unique, or just worth the attention for whatever the reason, and especially if it was overlooked. And that last is precisely the case when it comes to dominant species. The game depicts the conflict between the so-called Mind Lords and the evil human invaders who appeared on Mind Lord's planet, seemingly out of nowhere and unexpectedly. While the Mind Lords have been in conflict for eons, happily engaged with each other in a never-ending war, fighting for the so-called anima, the source of all life, the arrival of humans changed the rules of engagement forever. Now, Mind Lords have to fight off this new danger rather than focus on themselves. You, my dear viewer, play as one of these Mind Lords. Dominant species is very similar to most other RTSs when it comes to gameplay, so you have to mine resources, expand your base and build new units. That said, it's clear from the get-go that it was made with an emphasis on combat and not base management, as these rarely ever have more than just a few buildings. But units get all the attention in the world. There's 27 kinds of these, all rather interesting looking and smoothly animated, and all clearly made for particular purposes. So, efficient, well-chosen smaller groups of units will do better against enemy forces than an army of randomly picked drones would. Units gain experience and eventually level up, becoming stronger and more deadly, which is always fun regardless of the genre, as it adds to the feeling of progression. The missions that make up the campaign are rather demanding, so even the most hardcore fans of the genre should be able to enjoy the dominant species and its gameplay loop. Presentation is definitely game's strongest suit, with both graphics and sound design being of the highest quality for the time and very atmospheric, well fitting to the game's overarching style choice. If you're into the genre, check it out, but as someone who don't care much for RTSs, I can tell you right now that it didn't sway me to give it a prolonged testing back then and will most definitely not do it today. Heart of Darkness was supposed to be a spiritual successor to Another World, also known as Out of This World, so a cinematic action platformer with some puzzling taking place in a mysterious, stranger-than-fiction location and pitting you against the unknown alien-like enemies. And you know what? It kinda delivered. You play as Andy, a teenage boy whose dog Whiskey has been kidnapped by the unknown force while on a walk during a mysterious solar eclipse event. It doesn't take long for Andy to figure out that it was evil Master of Darkness's doing, and that to recover his pet friend he will have to travel to the very heart of darkness, to the Darklands. Now, if something like that would have happened to me, I would have never guessed that Master of Darkness was behind it. I'd have much bigger issues on my hand. First of all, where did I get the dog from in the first place, as I only have a cat? Secondly, why haven't I heard about the eclipse long beforehand, as you normally do? And finally, what or who in the hell is a Master of Darkness? Some Scandinavian death metal band, perhaps? I have no way of knowing. And then, and only then, after figuring out the earlier three, I would begin considering the whole who did what and why thing. But Andy's not me, and clearly he's the brighter of us both. Heart of Darkness is a side-view cinematic experience with lots of action sequences, tons upon tons of environmental puzzling, and some genre classic platforming, jumping, ducking and shooting. All of them mixed in more or less equal measures. Same as Another World, it's entirely linear and most of the sequences can be solved and completed in only one correct way. Heart of Darkness's presentation is very colorful and, dare I say it, cheerful looking, as if it was digitized from an animated movie and not crafted pixel by pixel, but don't let your eyes fool you. Not only it's much more difficult than already rather demanding Another World was, it's also chock full of very graphic and unique to most puzzle or action sequences, graphical death scenes. Some might say that it's worth to fail in Heart of Darkness just to experience all of these gruesome animations. I wouldn't, cause I hate repeating the same game sections. But that's me, and you may be curious. Interestingly enough, upon its original release, Heart of Darkness came with a pair of 3D glasses in a box, and some scenes during gameplay allowed them to be experienced in 3D. It wasn't something that was done often, and even less rare, with such an attention to detail. Rather kid-unfriendly detail, but detail nonetheless. In short, if you don't mind the difficulty, Heart of Darkness is probably the best game in today's video. Unless you prefer FPSs then. Remember how a few minutes ago I worried about Grim Fandango? Now, think how I must feel now when Half-Life's our next game. It's great, it's incredibly important and milestone in gaming history. Everyone knows it. And yet, whatever I might say about it, someone will take offense or point out what I overlooked or failed to mention. Still, I can't just ignore it. Well, naturally it's a sci-fi themed FPS in which you assume a role of Gordon Freeman. And he's not a soldier, special units agent, spy or a hero of any kind. Well, at least not yet. He's a scientist. You know, white coat, thick glasses, notepad and a coffee in hand kind of a scientist. And you will lead him through his entirely unexpected and action-packed adventure. Adventure that he did not sign up for, and yet one he will have to survive and figure out a way out from. So, you must escape the Black Mesa research facility after it's been invaded by the unknown aliens, following a disastrous in consequences scientific experiment. Or, to be precise, following a disastrous in consequences scientific failure. Half-Life spawned into existence as an answer to FPS market being overflown by the sea of semi-shooting-focused FPSs, all feeling like a carbon copies of one another, and all following the same formula of getting from point A to point B over X number of levels, collecting different weapons and killing ungodly numbers of enemies, with your motivation behind it all usually being just a text prompt telling you to do so. Now, this might have been a great idea in 1993 or 1994 even, but as the years passed, not much changed and the genre began to feel stagnant. Valve thought so too, so they aimed at refreshing the entire genre. The attention was put on immersive world building, deep and engaging plot written by real-life science fiction novelist, and storytelling via in-engine scripted events, never really taking the player out of experience or control from him, as opposed to by then genre standard separate animated or pre-rendered sequences. And boy oh boy, did they hit the nail. For once, it was not about dooms or quakes. No one cared about them. Everyone was into deep and immersive Half-Life, and good, cause it was just that. But very, Very good that is. If all that wasn't enough, Half-Life often had you figuring out small puzzles to progress, and while not mind-benders in any definition of the word, they were hardly ever just a collection of keys, and more often than not something unique, like navigating a maze of conveyor belts, using boxes to build a makeshift staircase, or figuring out a way how to use environment to kill the enemy. For instance, by using a valve to spray hot steam at the aliens. Half-Life did what it aimed for, it changed the entire genre, and for the better too. And whether you liked it or not, regardless if you cared for the genre or hated it, you cannot disagree the importance of it in the overall history of gaming. Might and Magic 6: The Mandate of Heaven is the 6th installment in the long-running first-person perspective party-based role-playing series, and the first game to take place on the same world as Heroes of Might and Magic 2 and 3, while continuing the story of the two. It featured a rather robust game world, deep and engaging but non-linear story, and user-friendly interface. Best of all, however, unlike many of the releases of the same size at the time, it was basically bug-free, which is not something that was common by 1998. In Might and Magic 6, you led a group of 4 adventurers on an epic quest to save the land of Enroth, in the process ridding it of technologically advanced alien Skrigans and finding the missing king. The game engine from earlier games in the series found its way to where it belonged by 1998, so trash, and entered the new and shiny full 3D solution. Now, traveling the world of Might and Magic with full 360 degrees movement and not one based on an underlying grid was something else. Especially that it was a world that was most entirely open for exploration. I mean, you could have even scaled the mountains if you wanted to. Not saying that there was reason to, but if you really wanted to, you could go for it. You know, as a personal achievement or something. Combat was best in the series too, it could be played in real time or turns, with both of these having their own ups and downsides. Real time allowed for free movement on the battlefield and using of environment in your favor, or if you're me and clumsy, then against you. And turns gave you plenty enough time to carefully pick spells and attacks and direct them at your chosen enemies. What's more, the game operates under a calendar schedule, meaning that many of the events and happenings that you may encounter are limited not only to the time of the day, but also a season and a particular date in a year even. Which meant that consecutive playthroughs of Mandate of Heaven could feel considerably different when approached with different adventurers and played in different quest order. Since we're on the subject of quests, side ones, while perhaps not very numerous, were usually well thought out and detailed in their setup and not just genre basic, go to a small seaside village and kill all the orcs there, or even collect 12 blue mushrooms to create a potion of a stiff stick. While there's no races to pick from in Mandate of Heaven and all created characters are human, there are classes of Knight, Druid, Paladin, Cleric, Sorcerer and Archer to pick between, and that choice will influence everything for the entire campaign. From weapons and gear that they can use, through stats to spells and skills. Everything. Might and Magic 6 scored high with critics and gamers upon its release, and deservedly so, as it was an amazing adventure and a really well-crafted game. Yoot Tower is an unofficial sequel and a better version of original Sim Tower. It was made by the same developer, but not published by Maxis, which was a bit of a double-edged sword, because on one hand, it gave them freedom to do whatever they wanted with a game, but on another, limited its visibility and potential reach. The goal in Yoot Tower is identical to that in original, to build as profitable tower as possible, which in turn meant expanding it considerably while balancing the development with correct usage of available transport system, so elevators, stairs and escalators. You start on an empty plot of land and must develop it into a successful and profitable venture by stacking up rooms of various kinds and functions, so shops, apartments, offices, restaurants, cinemas, convention centers, the whole shebang. Whenever a particular milestone or a task that the game requires of you to achieve is reached, a VIP will visit your tower to evaluate how you're doing. If this impression will be favorable, you will unlock a new milestone, new room and facilities, and you'll also get a bump up in the rating. And all this naturally influences your potential for future income. There are 3 kinds of elevators in the game: simple, express or service, and they all serve different purposes. Simple ones provide floor-by-floor transportation with an option of them not stopping on certain floors. Express elevators stop at 15-floor intervals, so they are great means of fast transport to cinemas, shopping malls, convention centers, you know, where you want to get fast and not disturb the regular tenants or office workers' daily rhythm. And finally, service elevators are used by stores for deliveries and general tower staff only, so security, cleaners and the likes. Most notable difference between the Yoot Tower and Sim Tower, other than the numerous bug fixes, would be the inclusion of seasons, which affect both number and types of visitors throughout the year. Seems like a small change, but makes for a more enjoyable and deep experience. If you like business/managerial simulations, Yoot Tower is definitely not one to skip. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six is a first-person perspective tactical shooter that moved its focus from over-the-top countless hordes of enemies killing genre standard to strategic anti-terrorist action. The game aims to be as realistic as possible, meaning that whenever any shots are fired, and it's not very often, someone usually dies after a hit or two. In fact, that very realism is what the game was known for, as it not only features true-to-life damage model, under which more often than not getting shot meant getting killed, but also offered a whole plethora of real weapons and equipment. From simple bulletproof vests, pistols, shotguns and grenades, all the way to the biosuits and specialized rifles. What's more, while the game is played in first-person view, it's hardly a hectic shoot-'em-up. You lead a group of Special Forces soldiers, or a few of these groups actually, and you can plan out their approach in each mission to the very last step. So, if you really wanted to, and more importantly, knew how, you could plan out whole mission approach without ever getting to participate in it yourself, at least in theory. Rainbow Six follows a campaign built out of several missions, completing of which pushes the plot forwards and sees you performing various daring tasks, like rescuing hostages, defusing bombs, gathering intelligence, or even planting surveillance devices, to name a few. And all that using various methods, so you may as well find yourself going through a particular mission infiltration style, silently, like a Shadow or an MP5 armed ninja, just to replay it the next playthrough in full frontal assault, guns blazing style, putting down enemies as soon as they enter your crosshair. That's hardly how most played it though. Successful and well thought out missions often only take just a few minutes and about 10 to 20 minutes of pre-planning, which for many FPS gamers meant that Rainbow Six was way too slow for them. Those that gave it a chance though, in grand majority loved it, and while I never completed it, I did find it to be unique and more enticing than most other run-of-the-mill shooters. Story-wise, you recruited into super special unit called Rainbow, the most elite counter-terrorism team in the world, with members from various countries, all to stop the spread of terrorism. The more missions you will go through, the more obvious it will become that there's something bigger at stake and that the fate of the entire world may lay upon your unit's performance. What a selection! I'm not even asking if you agree, I know you do. But please, don't let my bluntness offend you, I have another, much more important subject to raise here. Let me paint you an unconventional picture, one worth your time and one that will change your childhood forever. Destroy it even. So, if you want it to remain as innocent as it was, this is where you should stop watching this video. Now, you sure you wanna stay and carry on? It's my last warning. Okay, do you remember the Smurfs? A cartoon about those blue apple-sized forest creatures that wore white pointy hats and were delicacy for an evil wizard Gargamel? I mean, from time to time he did prefer turning them into gold rather than eating, but it was not often. Now, initially Smurfs were a total patriarchy. There were no women between them and we have no way of knowing how they reproduced. Perhaps cloning, which would explain how some of them were smart and useful and others not so much. You know, these were the broken ones for recycling, so to speak. Anyway, there were no female Smurfs, and it's quite obvious that there weren't, cause no woman would allow them to sing all those cult-like songs if she'd lived there. Still, brainwashed by the Papa Smurf, they all followed his leadership to the letter and always did what they were told, blindly following his bidding and never questioning it. Enter Smurfette, a dark-haired slim beauty secretly created by the Gargamel to infiltrate the Smurfs village and reveal it to her overlord so that he could catch them all and I don't know what then, perhaps eat them. But if he could create one, and a woman at that most definitely had much nicer and more delicate in taste flesh, why would he want the old and veiny males? Never mind. So, Smurfette appeared in the Smurfs village, seemingly out of nowhere, and started spreading her pheromones left and right, charming anyone and everyone that lived there, effectively negating Papa Smurf's years of brainwashing, supposedly. We don't know what she managed to achieve in her short time there, cause as soon as Papa Smurf laid his old and hungry eyes on her, he took her into his mushroom cottage and they didn't come back until the next morning. Now, what kind of crazy and awe-filled loving happened there, nobody knows. After all, what happens in Papa Smurf's hut stays in Papa Smurf's hut. But what we do know is that she emerged the next morning as a stunning blonde with a completely new outlook on life, no longer under the influence of her former creator. So what transpired in the hut throughout that hot summer night? Was it Papa Smurf's experience and lovemaking skills that changed her, and to the point of her hair losing color no less? I mean, it must have been something epic. Or perhaps magic of some kind was at play. But if there was magic involved, couldn't have Papa Smurf got rid of Gargamel a long time ago? Or maybe, just maybe, he explained to her an importance of makeup, taking care of one's body, and gave her a mani-pedi and a full Brazilian treatment of the likes the world hasn't seen before. We may never know, but I would like to invite you to theorize with me. What do you think really happened? Was Papa Smurf an old perf and used our poor heroine? Was it brainwashing, magic, or maybe something I haven't thought of? If you have a theory, let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. Smash them if you have to, it helps more than you could ever know. Also, I would like to thank you and all my amazing Patreon and YouTube members for helping this channel keep going. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank all the wonderful folks who record and upload playthroughs, let's plays and other retro-centric videos here on YouTube, because they help to preserve the games that would have otherwise been long forgotten. So thank you.
Oh no! What's going on? Come on, activate!
Sequence B1WA initiated.
Alright!
Countdown 30 seconds.
Pack emergency rations. Apple, a camera, and don't forget the frisky. Ah, great.
Ten seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Activate.
Wow, it works! Hang on, Whiskey, I'm coming! What the heck was that? Whoa! No!
Andy, we have a problem here.
I know! Oh, no, shoot!
Andy, we have
Okay. Ugh. You're a big help, you know that?